Okay, so today we're going to be going over 3 important jazz scales you must know for improvisation. Each one of these scales can be used in your soloing and can be used in compositions as well. So let's jump into it. This first one is based off of the major scale, but with an additional note. Okay, so this is Barry Harris's major 6th diminished scale. It's also known as the major bebop scale, and all it is a major scale with an added note in between the 5th and the 6th degree. So this is a C major scale, which is typically a 7-note scale, but we're going to be adding a G sharp or an A flat. So here it is again. Okay, now the purpose of this scale is basically if you're playing eighth notes and you're starting on the C, on the downbeat, then you're going to land on the important notes on the other downbeats of the measure. Basically, you're going to land on the arpeggio of a C6 chord, which would be C, the root, E is the 3rd, G is the 5th, and A is the 6th. All the other notes are passing tones, and they're going to be on the upbeats. So if we start on beat 1, we have 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, and then you're back on beat 1 of the next measure if we're in 4/4, and it goes the same way backwards. So beat 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1. Okay, so according to Barry Harris, you would play this scale if you are starting on one of the key notes on a downbeat. So if you start on a C, you'll land on the correct notes on the other downbeats. But if you start on one of the other notes that's not in the C6 chord on a downbeat, you actually wouldn't play the passing tone. You would just play a normal C major scale. So for example, if I start on the B and I go down the scale, I can just play the scale. So I'm skipping the note in between the 5th and the 6th, the G sharp that time. So you can try this out. I'm playing it in this second position over here, but you can play it all over the neck, all over the fretboard. There's a bunch of different ways to finger this scale. I tend to try to use each finger, so whenever I play it like this. See, on the E, F, G, and G sharp, I'm using each finger, all 4 of my fingers. You could also just slide the pinky up. That's another option. But I would try it out in this position. I would try it out starting with different fingers, starting on different strings. You want to be able to play it all over the fretboard. And then once you have all that down, you can try it in different keys. You can try it in F, try it in G, etc. This scale is very important whenever you're playing over the 1 chord, over the tonic. So in this case, if we're in the key of C and we're playing a C chord or a C major 7 or C6, you could use this scale to improvise. And it works really well with 8th notes, so continual 8th note lines. You could also play it over an A minor 7 because that has the same notes as the C6, an A, a C, an E, and a G. So an A minor 7 is just an inversion of a C6. So this scale will work over the 1 chord. It can work over, say you're playing an A minor 7 in the key of G, like a 2-5-1. You could play it there as well. You could play it over just the A minor chord, the 6th chord. So it's a very useful scale. But the primary use right now is over a C chord, just over the tonic chord. So just remember, you have your arpeggio, the 1, 3, 5, and 6, and those are the important notes that you want to try to land on the downbeat. Okay, so if you start on the upbeat, say if I were going to play an and to start with, and 1, in that case I did C to B, I would not play the added note. I would just play the C major scale, because then I land on those important notes. And as you just saw, you can stop wherever you want. So in that case, I stopped on the E. But say I started on the and playing the B note, I could then add in that chromatic tone. Okay, so that was B, and then going down. So I went down the bebop scale, or the Barry Harris 6th diminished scale. Okay, so let's move on to our second scale. The second scale is very similar, but it's going to be a dominant scale. So here it is. Okay, so this one, same exact concept, but this time the chromatic tone is in between the A and the B. So we have the 6, the flat 7, the major 7, and then you're back at the root. So again, we're going to hit the major, or the main parts of the arpeggio on the downbeats if we're playing this correctly. So here's C, the root, C is the root, the 3rd, the 5th, and the flat 7 of a C7 chord. So if I start on this high C, okay, that's 1 and 2, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1. So I'm hitting all those important notes. Again, if I started on a tone that's not in the arpeggio, I would just play the regular scale. So say I started on a D note. See, I skipped the B. I went straight to the B flat. Okay, so again, same concept. You, as the first scale, you want to land on the arpeggio notes on the downbeat. Okay, because those are you're outlining the chord. This is if you're playing over a C7 chord. This could work over other chords. It could work over like a G minor 7 as well if you're playing a 2-5-1 in F. But right now we're just going to focus on one chord for each one of these scales. So this would be for a dominant chord. So if you're playing a C7 in a 2-5-1, or just if you're vamping over a C7 chord for a while, you can play this scale. And you want to really emphasize those key notes on the downbeat. And that makes it sound like you are playing the chord. Even if there's no actual chord being played, this sounds like C7. Okay? So again, practice the scale in this position, practice it all over the neck, try to figure it out in as many different ways as you can, and then try it out in different keys as well. Okay, so the last scale we're going to talk about is the minor variant. So we went over the major bebop, we went over the dominant bebop. Now this scale, there's different minor bebop scales, but the one I'm going to go over today is the Barry Harris minor 6 diminished scale. And I like this one because it outlines a minor 6 chord, just like the major one. So here it is on C again. Okay, so what happens here is we have a C minor scale, but then we kind of switch into a melodic minor at the end. So we have an A, a B, and a C at the end. We have both the A flat and the A natural. So the flat 6, the natural 6, the natural 7, and back to C. So we don't have a B flat in this scale. There are other minor bebop scales that do include the flat 7, but this one, I would use this scale over a tonic minor chord. So if a if a song is in the key of C minor, I would use this scale. So again, it's outlining the arpeggio. In this case, a C minor 6 arpeggio. So the root, the 3rd, the 5th, and the 6th. We're hitting those key tones whenever we're playing eighth notes, going up or going down. So if I went down and I'm playing eighth notes, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1. I'm landing on the arpeggio on the downbeats. If I started on that D note, I actually add in the B flat to land on the A. That's one option. Now, another option could be to add a chromatic tone in between the D and the C. Okay, so now I'm back on the downbeat on my root on C. So there you go. So the key thing with these scales is the arpeggio. You want to remember that you're trying to land on those important notes on the downbeats, okay? So they're not really scales in the same sense as most people practice a typical bebop scale. They practice it up and down and just try to play that scale over various chords. This is a little bit different. So Barry Harris's methods are basically you're putting in chromatic tones in certain places so that you can line up your rhythm or line up your notes rhythmically in the measure so that you're landing on the downbeats on those chord tones. And it really works. It really creates a nice jazz bebop sound, and it emphasizes the chord tones, which makes your soloing sound a little bit more focused, okay? So I hope you enjoyed this lesson. You should practice these 3 scales, different keys. I'm going to upload a PDF onto my Patreon that's going to have everything that we went over today. So if you're interested in that, please check out my Patreon. I'll have a link in the description. Thank you.